I got a strange going on out here. Something just killed my dog.
Something killed your dog?
I'm Dan Hamilton. I'm the host of the Cryptid podcast. You guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight. You guys, I've got a really, really cool guest with us tonight. I've got Mr. Vic Cundiff with us tonight. He is the host of Dogman Encounters. And I was recently on his show, kind of went through some of my experiences, and I just threw it out there, asked him if he'd like to come on my show, and he was very, very happy to facilitate that for me. Vic has been doing this since 2008. Talking with him earlier, he has never really had an actual sighting, but he's had many, many Class B encounters. And I'm a firm believer that sometimes some of those Class B encounters are way, way scarier, way more intense than an actual sighting. So without further ado, everybody, Mr. Vic Cundiff, welcome to the show, sir.
Well, thanks for having me, but after a build-up like that, were you trying to get me nervous or something?
No, it's like I said, it's a big pleasure to have you on the show. And I've been listening to you for, I don't know, since actually before I was on your show, I started listening to some things, and yeah, I'm just glad I did reach out to you, and thank you so much for agreeing to come on my show. I don't know if you know it, but I hit 1,000 subscribers today, so
Oh, wow, congrats.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's go ahead and, like you had mentioned earlier, in like 2008 is when you kind of got started. You were a co-host on a podcast, and then you kind of took a hiatus, and you came back. And a lot of people, from what I understand, really, really know you from Dogman Encounters. So are we going to be getting to listen to some Dogman Encounters that you may have had, and maybe a few Sasquatch encounters you may have had?
Well, I've never had any Dogman encounters, but there have been 4 times, 3 or 4. I can't remember which one right now on the spot, but I've had a collection of experiences where I believe Sasquatch were near. There were 2 sightings that I had that might have been Sasquatch, but I don't want to jump to conclusions and say they definitely are, because unless you definitively know that's what you saw, I don't think it's right to say that you definitely had a sighting. So it's
Yeah,
just one of those things.
I agree with you on that 100%. Some of the stories that I told you, I didn't have a confirmed sighting. So I'm not saying that was 100% what it was. So hey, would you like to just go ahead and get into those stories?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. The first one happened right around 45-ish or so years ago. And the way that played out was I had a neighbor who, I mean, he was just Mr. Outdoors. You wouldn't believe the stories he had to share about things he had done and seen in the great outdoors. I used to go down to that man's house, and I'd sit on his couch listening to him tell me story after story about things he had done in the woods, things he had seen in the woods, friends' experiences that were really interesting. I'd sit down there on that man's couch until he'd pull out the newspaper and start reading it. I just couldn't get enough of it. Well, he had a farm way out in the middle of nowhere, and he knew how much of a nut I was about the wilderness, the outdoors. And one day when I was down at his house, he said, "You're so into the woods and the wilderness. Why don't you get I wasn't licensed to hunt. He said, why don't you go take the hunter safety course? And if you get your deer hunting license, I'll take you to the farm and we'll do some deer hunting down there, and I'll show you the ropes and everything." So yeah, I did that. I went ahead and took the hunter safety course, and before too long I had my license, and it wasn't long after that opening day was right around the corner. Well, the plan was we were going to drive down to his farm the day before opening day of season. And yeah, so that's what we did. We went to his farm, and as we were driving down the lane, we came upon this one horse, and it was a long lane off the road. It was a pretty sizable farm, pretty big property. We were driving down his lane, and after we got fairly close to his house, to the farmhouse there on the right side of the road, we just came around a bend and there's this bay horse. Well, he knew I was a horse nut. And I said something about the horse. And he said, oh, yeah, that's Red. Stay away from him. He'll kill you. Well, like Mom used to say, a hard head makes a soft behind. Somebody tells you that about their horse, you don't need to second guess what they're saying. Just listen to them. So I figured, okay, well, yeah, I'll just keep away from Red. I can't remember the other horse. He had 2 bays. After a short distance, heading down the lane after that, we came upon the other one. And I said something about that one. And he said, yeah, that's so-and-so and so-and-so. I can't remember that horse's name, but he said, yeah, he's fine. You can go and interact with him. So we continued on and we parked in front of the house and we got unpacked and everything. And we got settled in. And before too long, it was time to go to bed. So I went up to the attic where I was going to sleep, and he went to his bedroom and lights out. Well, just like we had planned, bright and early. Well, it wasn't even bright. It was before sunlight. We got up and I got dressed and headed down, and we had breakfast, a small breakfast. And then we got dressed, and before too long, we headed out. Well, we walked out across the land there that he had and into the forest. And we walked for a good distance down this big hollow, up another side of a hollow, up, down, up, down, up, down. And then finally, after a good distance of walking, he finally said, all right, this is it. This is your spot. He said, I'm going to leave you here until just before sundown, and I'll be hunting a couple of ridges over. He said, I'll just come back in just before sundown and get you on the way back to the house, to the farmhouse. He said, remember what I told you, and good luck. So he turned around and left, and I just copped a squat leaning up against this big oak tree and just settled in. And I can't remember exactly how long it was before the sun actually came up, but it wasn't that long. It was like, I guess, half an hour, 45. Well, I'm sitting there remembering everything he taught me, and I'm just doing everything he said. No sudden movements. I'm just taking in everything, listening to everything that I could. Well, nothing was moving. That was one of the strange things. Nothing was going on. Nothing was moving. I can't remember if I even saw a squirrel that morning, but nonetheless, nothing was going on. I sat there until afternoon. It was some indeterminate amount of time afternoon when all of a sudden I heard this loud horse whinny behind me. Now I'm sitting leaning up against a big oak tree that it was definitely wider than I am. I was leaning up against a big oak tree, and all of a sudden I hear this loud horse whinny that sounded like it was coming from about maybe 20 feet behind me, about the length of a pickup truck. And instantly my mind went there. I thought, oh no, Red followed us out here. Red's right behind me. Well, the problem with that is I was on the bank of a big hollow, and that bank was too steep for even a crazy horse to think about going on. When we came in, we traversed the bank. We didn't go down, straight down the bank. A horse wouldn't want anything to do with trying to come down that slope. And also, too, there was probably a foot or more worth of tree trash, sycamore leaves, oak leaves galore. I would have heard a horse from a mile away trying to come in there. There wasn't any sound. I was sitting there motionless, being as quiet as I could. I wasn't making any noise. I would have heard a horse from way off. Well, all of a sudden, just out of the blue, you hear this loud horse whinny that close behind you. And then I can't remember how long it was after that. It wasn't long. It wasn't long. I can tell you that. I heard this loud, forceful horse blow. Now, I'm sure a lot of people listening to your show, they don't know horses, or they know a little bit about horses, but not much. The story with horses, what's peculiar about their anatomy, one of the strange things about their anatomy is the fact that they cannot breathe through their mouths. They can only breathe through their nostrils. Most people don't know that. Well, that fact right there is the biggest reason why you hear horses blowing through their nostrils so often. Now, not a true blow, more of a... They're doing that to clear their nasal passages for that reason. If you could only breathe through your nostrils, you'd be pretty particular on keeping them clean as well. Well, they can also do what's called a blow. When they get one crossways up there or something's not right up there, they'll do a blow to really clear those nostrils out. and it is loud and it is forceful. If you're not expecting it, it can scare you out of your boots. And that's what I heard from like 20 feet or less right behind me on the other side of that tree. And what's freaky is I'm a big guy. There aren't many guys as big as I am. There's no way that my lungs could come close to reproducing the volume of air that was moved, the concussive force. That's the biggest thing. The concussive force that you hear when you're next to a 1,000 pound, 1,200 pound horse when it does a good blow. If you're not used to it, it'll set you back, because we're used to our lung volume. When people cough, when they sneeze, we're used to that. We're not used to lungs that are attached to a 1,000 pound animal, a 1,200 pound animal. So that's why I'm saying when you are close to a horse that does a real blow, it just takes you aback. Well, that's what I heard. Some indeterminate time after I heard that whinny. I think it was roughly 30 seconds or something like that after the whinny, but it just really got my attention. If a horse couldn't be on that slope, because I would have heard it from a mile away, and it's too steep on top of that for a horse to even think about wanting to walk on, what could sneak up on me and get that close to me without me seeing it, without me hearing it? Nothing. If it wouldn't have done those sounds, I never would have known it was there. So that's why I'm convinced it must have been 1,000 pounder, 1,000, maybe a plus 1,000 pound Sasquatch that had come up behind me. Who knows how long it was there? Who knows how long it stayed after it made those noises? I did look around the tree one way, didn't see anything. Looked around the tree trunk the other way, didn't see anything. There was no way. I had more than a good enough view to be able to see any horse that was on the slope of that big hollow bank that I was sitting on. No place for a horse to hide. I would have definitely seen it. Nothing. Didn't see anything. So that's what makes me pretty much convinced it had to be a Sasquatch that day that was watching me for who knows how long. Now, after that experience, the next one was when I was walking out in the country, and to get to where I was at when I actually had this sighting, you had to go up and over this arched bridge over this brook, and brook / creek. Well, I had gone up and over that arched bridge and walked about maybe about 3/8 of a mile. And it was a really nice day. I was enjoying myself, had time to just get away and unwind. So that's why I was doing that. Well, I got about 3/8 of a mile on the other side of that bridge, and I turned around to start heading back to the truck. Well, when I was about a quarter mile or so from that bridge, maybe a hair over a quarter mile from that bridge, I had a green field. I was walking through a green field. There was like green field on the left of me, green field on the right of me. And it was grown up about 6 feet tall. So I could still see over the top of it, but not very well because of slopes and stuff like that. But it was pretty flat ground. Well, I had a view of the top of that arched bridge. And as I'm walking, I look over this way, I look over that way, and then some motion caught my attention over by the bridge. So I looked over that way, and I see this black figure that was, I still don't know exactly how tall it was. Comparing the figure to the handrails on the bridge, I don't think it was that much taller than I am. It was probably maybe 6'9", maybe 7 feetish or so. Maybe not that tall. But nonetheless, it was kind of jogging, doing this like jog thing up and over the arch bridge, where it was, the best way I can describe it, it was plucking its feet up off of the deck of the bridge as it was coming. There's no reason for a person to move the way this thing was moving. It wasn't hindered in its motions. It was pretty smooth, and it looked like it was practiced at doing it, but it was, just doing this plucking motion with its feet. And as it came up towards the top of the bridge, I could pretty much see all of its body. And then as it came down onto my side, its lower body started to disappear behind that green field that was on the left of me. Well, as it got down to the ground and off of the bridge, it just basically disappeared behind that green field as it got to a spot that was just too low for me to see its head. And then while all this was going on, I hurried up my pace, hoping that when I got to the end of that green field, I could look left because it turned to its right, my left. I was hoping I could look down that way to where it had traveled and seen it somehow. But with the speed it was moving and me being so far, maybe a hair over a quarter of a mile from where I would need to get to turn and look left to see it, I figured the chances of me actually catching a glimpse of it at that point were almost nil. But that's what happened that day. And one of the things was it was jet black and the top of his head was pointed. Now, it could have been a person with a black sweatshirt on with a real point on its hood. Maybe that's what it was, a tall guy that was wearing jet black pants, black shoes, and a black sweatshirt. That's entirely possible, but as nice of a day out as it was, I mean, I was thinking to myself, why would somebody be wearing a sweatshirt if that is a person? Now, that doesn't preclude the chance because we've all seen people, especially lately, the kids going out on hot summer days, even with sweatshirts. I don't get that, but they do. So, I mean, that doesn't preclude the chance, like I said, that it was a person wearing a sweatshirt that day, but I couldn't see anything of their face. The color where their face would be, where you see the face through the hood, it was all the same shade all the way across. So I don't know. All I can do is just tell you what I experienced, and that's, you make of it what you will. That's all that I can tell you.
Okay, so as I was listening to you, I was writing down just some questions I have. So, plucking the feet. What do you mean by plucking the feet? Like, I'm trying to understand the motion.
The best way to describe it would be if you had some really powerful stickum on the bottom of your shoes
Uh,
and were trying to generate enough force to get the soles of your shoes off of the surface you're standing on or running on without throwing yourself off balance. High kneeing, kind of,
yep.
in a way, but high kneeing isn't a good way to describe it. It's just hard to describe the way he or it was moving. But yeah, I've never seen anyone move this way training for football or any other sport. That's just, yeah, the way it was moving was off, but it didn't look unbalanced. It didn't look encumbered or awkward or anything. It just was moving in a really strange way. That's a pretty bad way to describe it, but that's the best way I can give you the picture without you actually being there with me that day.
No, that makes perfect sense. I understand. So there's kind of a resistance every time it lifted its foot up. There's kind of a small bit of resistance. So it was using a little more force to pull its foot up, and then place it down and pull the next one up. I completely got you on that one. So when it went over this bridge and in like not saying into the green field, but possibly into the green field, do you think it's possible that it might have seen you, and when it got, because it knew it was completely exposed, possibly going over this bridge, and it saw you, so when it got on the other side, that it dropped down so you couldn't see it? Do you think that's a possibility, maybe?
That's entirely possible. My head would have been visible. I think my whole head would have been visible over the green field from even if it was standing on the ground. On the other end of the green field, my whole head should have been visible above that green field. So if it was looking in the right direction and paying attention, then yeah, I was definitely visible. But when it was up on the apex of that bridge, it would have been able to see more of me, of course. Whether it did see me or not, I don't know. I can tell you this, I was in a position where it could have easily just moved its eyes and seen me without turning its head. I mean, I was so far away from it, like I said, just a quarter mile, maybe a hair over a quarter mile. Definitely not a mile and a 3/8 though. But yeah, I mean, maybe it did see me, but it didn't let me know that it was looking at me. I don't know.
And it's funny, you said, it could have been someone maybe jogging, and I kind of took that, haphazardly or heartedly, I meant. Um, how many 7-footers do you see out running around wearing hood? I honestly, Vic, I honestly believe you saw Sasquatch that day.
Well, I don't want to jump to conclusions. He might have been like 6'8", 6'9". I don't know for sure how tall it was. That was the thing. It was so far away in the black. And also, I've walked over that bridge before, but never paid too much attention to exactly how high those rails are. But my best guess on how tall that figure was, that guy was, I'd say probably 6'9", maybe 7 feet.
Look at the world population. How many 6'9" to 7 foot guys do you see walking around or running around? It's a small percentage. So,
Yeah.
but hey, that's a really awesome eyewitness account that you saw there. And again, I like how you describe it and how you don't come out and say it was definitely a Sasquatch, because there's always that open window of probability that it's something else. So, um, I got another question for you. So, you've been doing podcasting or co-hosting on, a different podcasts and whatnot. Um, Through all these years that you've done this, is there any particular story or stories that just really, if you sit and you think about it, it comes right to the forefront of your memory? That it's either funny, absolutely frightening. Do you have any stories like that?
Yeah, as far as dogmen go, and that's the cryptid that I've spent by far and away the most effort helping people with their encounters. Well, I don't help Sasquatch eyewitnesses deal with their encounters. I I interview them for my 2 Sasquatch podcasts, but yeah, as far as dogmen go, that's the girl that brought me to the dance. I mean, I do help people, a lot of people who you never hear from on dogman encounters, come to terms with their experiences. And in addition to that, yeah, I interview eyewitnesses about their dogman encounters as well, that you do hear their encounters on the show. But as far as the most memorable encounters go, 2 of the encounters that are probably the most memorable that people have heard on the show are, one of them would be episode 117 of Dogman Encounters, where JT talked about this Dodge Coronet hot rod he had when he was younger, and he was driving it down this country road late one night, and I think he had an argument with his wife. Something wasn't right in his life, and I think he was upset. And that is a strange quirk about encounters that a lot of people don't know. If you're upset and you're in an area where dogmen are, for some reason, that does seem to increase the odds of an encounter happening. But nonetheless, he was driving down this lonely country road one night, and I guess there was a pretty good moon out. Well, all of a sudden, as he's driving with some forest on the left-hand side of the road, but a pasture, a pretty big pasture on the right. The pasture was backed up by a tree line, but the tree line was a pretty good distance away from the road, so the pasture was fairly open. Well, all of a sudden, he noticed a shape separate from the tree line and make like a diagonal angle towards the road to try and intersect him, his path. Well, there was a barbed wire fence there that was just a few feet off the road. Well, as the road was winding, following this pasture in the woods on the left, this thing was getting closer and closer and closer. It wasn't the type of section of road where it would have been ideal to try to pick up much speed. So he's just keeping an eye on this thing, watching the road, keeping an eye on the thing to watch his progress. Well, before too long, it got to the fence and it just hopped over the fence without any trouble. Next thing he knew, it was running up alongside the passenger door of his car, of his Coronet. And he talked about all the physical features on it. He noticed the wolf-like head, the hands that had these really long claws on them. I think the whole thing was blacker than black. He described it as being, and it was running, I think, 40 miles an hour, 45, keeping up with his car effortlessly. Well, I think it started reaching into the car, acting like it was trying to gain entry. And I think it might have even tried to stick its head in the car. Well, right about then, he got to a part of the road where he was able to goose it, and he sped up, and he was able to keep enough distance between him and it so that it couldn't actually get into the car, which I don't think it did want to get into the car. That's a common thing that these things do. They'll make you think they want to get you, but in fact, they don't. They're just trying to torment you. But nonetheless, yeah, he got to a part of the road where he could open up that Coronet, and he left it in his dust. But That is probably the most popular episode of the show. The second most popular episode, or very close to the second most popular episode, would be the one where it's episode 100. And gosh, I forgot the name. Alexa. That's the anonymous name that the eyewitness chose to keep her identity hidden. Her father had a house in the countryside of Germany that was like a glass house. Almost the whole house was glass. Well, her father had to head into town for something. He was going to be away for the night. So he asked her to watch the house, to house sit that night. Well, she brought her big German Shepherd with her, and she settled in. I think she got there right before dark. So she settled in and just planned to watch movies and just take it easy for the whole night. Well, unfortunately, it wound up being anything but a laid back night for her. Sometime after dark, she started hearing this tapping on the glass of the house. And if I remember right, and basically it wound up being a matter of this dog man laying siege to her home, to her dad's home. It's bad enough when you know you have one of these things outside of a normal house, but when the whole house is glass, making it that much harder to hide, I mean, that's just nightmare fuel right there. So she talked about all these things she did to try and deal with all this trauma that was going on. It was just absolutely horrible. It's just like a horror movie. It really was. But eventually the dog man left. I don't think it was all that long before dawn. The dog man left, and I think her dad showed up not too long after that. And yeah, she just chronicled all the things that she went through that night. It was absolutely horrible what she went through. But yeah, I think that was probably the second most popular episode of the show due to how traumatic it was.
I'm definitely be checking out those two. So have you ever heard of the Moorbach monster?
I've heard of the Moorbach monster, but I can't remember what it is.
So I did, my buddy Josh and I, we did a live, and I did some digging um, uh, on the Moorbach monster. And I'm here to tell you that a lot of the stuff that you're going to read online is all fabricated. There's so many discrepancies in what's on there. And the reason I know this is because I actually spoke to the flight sergeant who was on duty when that happened. I went on to a Facebook group, asked if anybody had ever been stationed at Moorbach, and a couple people said yeah, and then one person just reached out to me and was like, "Why do you want to know about Moorbach?" And I go, "Well, I do a podcast. I'd like to know more about the Moorbach monster. If you were there." He goes, "I'll send you a message." And I sat there and talked to him on the phone. He was giving me detail after detail after detail. I was able to verify where he was stationed at the time. Yeah, that's a pretty good episode. I'll have to send that to you. Let you check that out.
Wow. I've heard of the Moorbach monster, but I can't remember what it's supposed to be. Is it supposed to be a dog man or a Sasquatch?
Dogman.
A dog man. Okay. Well,
Inside a restricted area, a fenced-in area, and even a canine. I think the canine's name was Rocky. He laid down. He laid down and refused to work. He would not work, and it was like 1 minute would be here, the next minute would be there. And these airmen, these security police were like they were just dumbfounded. Like it was just moving everywhere. So.
And that's something that you said did not happen, but was presented as happening?
No, it did happen.
It did happen.
But a lot of the stuff if you look up Moorbach monster, from what this flight sergeant told me, who was there, it was his flight that this happened on. A person who was not even there, wasn't even stationed at that base at the time, later came to the base, heard the story, put in some stuff that he made up, and then took bits and pieces from the stories that people were telling him, and then he posted it as his own.
Oh, I believe it. There are so many charlatans when it comes to dog men putting fake stories out there and nonsense. That's why I get so upset, when you listen to podcasts, and I don't listen to dogman podcasts. This is what I do. I'm not a mechanic. I'm not an attorney. This is what I do for a living. I'd help dogman eyewitnesses come to terms with their encounters. There's no novelty in dogman stories for me. I mean, I get tons of it. I've said this before in interviews. I mean, I don't bat an eye if I have 3-4 brand new dogman eyewitnesses contact me in a day about their encounters who I've never heard from before. Some days it'll be as crazy as having 7 or 8 brand new eyewitnesses contact me about their dogman encounters I've never heard from before. So yeah, there is no novelty to this at all for me. But I mean, I do get really frustrated, and this is something I've harped on a lot lately. There are so many podcasts out there airing absolute nonsense about dogmen. This dogman attack that never happened, that dogman attack that never happened. I mean, there are shows where every week it seems like it's a new dogman attack that they're airing, presenting as being factual, when in fact it's just fiction. There's nothing at all wrong with creepypasta as long as you let your listeners know that the stories are made up and not real. But when dogman eyewitnesses listen to this crap about the face-eating dogman that's going to rip you apart as soon as look at you, they think that it's a real story, and they were already having so much trouble coming to terms with their encounter that they actually did have with the dogman. They listen to this crap, and then I have to talk them off the ledge and explain to them, look, this didn't happen, that didn't happen. I just get so tired of that. I mean, it's just a case of people caring more about lining their pockets than the truth.
Yeah.
And that's really a shame.
Josh and I, again, my buddy from Mysteries Unknown, he's the host there. We have different perspectives on Sasquatch. We tend to believe the same thing when it comes to Dogman. But first and foremost, what's the word I'm looking for? The well-being of our guests is pretty much like our first and foremost priority. We want everybody to know it's a safe space to come here and talk to us. Him and I both have gotten emails. Matter of fact, I'm going to read some encounters from one individual. He doesn't want to come on. He doesn't want any notoriety, doesn't want any fame, doesn't want anybody really in and around his area. But he said, I have to get this off my chest. And I said, would you like to come on the show? And that's when he said no. And he goes, but if you would like to read my encounters, I would really appreciate it. So, I mean, I'm going to record me reading his encounters. But again, I like it when I go to a podcast and I listen, and I can tell that the host is genuine in the fact that they want to help their guest work through step by step of what they encountered. And I've listened to a few of your podcasts. I'm definitely going to listen to episode 117 and 100 because I love that kind of stuff. And so again, I'm just going to say thank you for what you do. I haven't personally had one. I think I saw one, but to me, it appeared as a giant wolf. I think I told you that story. I've never seen a wolf that big in my life. And that's what I just pass it off as. So, but, a little bit ago, you kind of leaked a little tidbit to me. And you said you're sitting on some unknown or unreleased information that you've never talked about. How about you? Well, I don't know. Would you be willing to talk about that?
Well, gee, Dan, what in the world are you talking about there?
Yeah,
No.
you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the gist of that is when I was putting all the pieces together to air that first episode of Dogman Encounters in 2014, well, there were a lot of pieces I wanted to put in place before I aired that episode. Had ideas about how I wanted the show to be and everything. And one of the ideas I had was contacting, and I did this. I contacted Linda Godfrey to ask her if she would be interested in actually hosting the show. I would do all the work to create the show, but I asked her when I contacted her if she would be interested in being the host and I could be the co-host. It's color color commentary, basically. And when I asked her about that, she said no, she wouldn't be interested in doing that. And that's totally fine. I mean, there's no pressure to do that. But what's ironic is about 7 months later or whatever, when I did finally have all the pieces in place to air the first episode of the show, and I was literally 1 month away from airing episode 1. It's ironic that this Dogman researcher contacted me. I couldn't believe this. This Dogman researcher contacted me, and he had the nerve to ask me. He said, "Hey, I'm going to be taking part. I'm going to be a co-host on a podcast, a new podcast where we interview Dogman eyewitnesses. Linda Godfrey is going to be the host, and we'd like to know if you'd like to be part of it." And I was laughing. I thought, oh my gosh. Yeah, after doing all this work to put the pieces together to air episodes of Dogman Encounters, I'm going to just throw that to the wind. And I had sunk tons of money into it too. I'm going to throw all that to the wind and just come over onto that show, when I was the one that actually presented the idea to her, asking her if she would be interested in being the host on Dogman Encounters, and I would just be the co-host. So I thought that was pretty funny. I thought, you've got to be kidding me. But yeah, that's the gist of what happened there. That's the little known thing that I haven't put out there.
Well, that went that went to an area I had no idea was going. I thought I was going to get some real juicy tidbits, like some exclusive Dogman Encounters that may be coming up. But holy smokes, I didn't expect that. But
I didn't either.
And I understand that. In my real job, I've been, where I've done a lot of work and put in a lot of time and got things turned around on certain things. Just watched someone take credit for all the hard work that I had done. So I kind of understand where you come from there. But do you have any other Dogman Encounters that kind of stick out outside of episode 100 and 117? I love hearing Dogman Encounters. I know there's an encounter that my buddy Josh, he'll play the audio, and it's one of the most terrifying encounters that I've ever heard in my life. I like to shut my light off so it's nice and dark with the exception of the glow of my monitor, and listen to it. It sounds like he's an elderly gentleman, and he's driving, and literally he says this Dogman comes out of nowhere and it's chasing his car, and he could hear its claws raking on his car, like it's reaching in trying to grab him while he's driving. And I wish I knew who that was. But I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I really love to listen to, and I know my listeners love listening to Dogman. I get emails and I get messages all the time like, "I love your Dogman Encounters. Can you please have some more on there?" So, do you have any more by chance?
Wow. Gosh, I talk with so many eyewitnesses about their encounters. It's so hard to keep the details straight. It really is. On episode 319, I had a guest named Mo come on and talk about an experience he had when he was in the military, in the Army. He was driving a deuce and a half, and this dog woman was on one side of his truck, and then a dog man was on the other. They were coming after the truck, and he believes that they were after the food in the back. He was bringing food to soldiers that were taking part in this drill, this operation, or an exercise, I guess you should say. And the male, there was a sergeant in the passenger seat of the truck. And somehow, I don't remember why, but he had opened up his door. And when he opened up his door, as they were driving down this lane through the forest, the male Dogman jumped up to try and stick its hand in the door. And when it did that, the sergeant, I guess his name was Top, that was his nickname, the sergeant Top slammed that door shut on the Dogman's hand. Well, at that point, I guess the only thing sticking in the door when the door closed was one of its claws. And this guest, Mo, said it snapped off the claw, and he actually kept that claw as a souvenir for some time until, I guess, after he had told other people on the base about this claw that he had and the story behind what happened. He was visited by some black suits that
Mm.
promptly took that claw away, and he's got nothing to show now for it. But yeah, that was a really popular episode due to the fright factor. I mean, a really scary experience that he and Top had.
Yeah, that's see, and I like I said, I'm prior military, and I love hearing encounters, Dogman, um, Bigfoot. I know I wish I could reach out to some of these people. I've even heard that Jersey Devil has made an appearance in the Pine Barrens up in New Jersey. Um, when some armed soldiers were out doing, maneuvers and things like that. That stuff just fascinates me. So, so with everything that we've discussed tonight and stories that you've told, let me ask you something, because I know you haven't had a personal experience with Dogman. Um, you may have had some encounters with Sasquatch. I'm going to ask you two questions. So one, what do you think Sasquatch is? And again, I may catch some heck for this because other people ask that same question, but you know what? You can't copyright a question. So, so what do you think it is?
It's all too easy to just grab the easiest solution and say, that's my answer and I'm sticking to it, which would obviously be saying that it's just a relic hominid.
Mhm.
But there are so many credible eyewitnesses out there who report seeing things that these guys do that a normal flesh and blood creature could not do. I mean, there are very credible eyewitnesses out there reporting that sort of thing. And I couldn't believe it, but not too long ago, researchers like Tim Kumbo Baker and there's another man, what's his name? Tal Branco. Both of them, they were of the mindset, or Tim is still alive. Unfortunately, we lost Tal not that long ago. But yeah, of all people I ever expected to hear say that they believed that Sasquatch were something a little extra special. They did have special abilities. I would have thought that Tim Kumbo Baker would be the last person to ever come out and say that, but even he has come around to reveal experiences that he's had that point towards these guys being something extra. And other people have come forward and basically done the same thing. What does that make them? Are they from the ether? Are they aliens? I don't know, but yeah, I really do believe there's something special. There's something special about them that makes them above and beyond being just flesh and blood creatures with no special abilities.
I agree. Martin Groves, Daryl Denton, they, I trust what they say. Yeah, Mr. Groves has had some extraordinary, and Mr. Denton as well has had some extraordinary encounters in the LBL. And there are multiple people going there at separate times in different places that are also experiencing similar things to back their story up. So, you know, I at first when I first got into this, I was 100% solid, flesh and blood. There's no portals, there's nothing this, there's nothing this. But then listening to all these encounters, interviewing people, I tend to agree, there's something more to them. What that is, I'm not sure. So the second part of my question is, what do you think a dogman is? Where do they come from?
Well, they do things too that you just can't explain away by saying that they're flesh and blood creatures out there scratching out a living, no pun intended, in the forest. You just can't do that with them. I mean, there's so many credible eyewitnesses who have reported seeing them disappear into what would appear to be a portal and do other things that you just can't point to and say, yeah, that's just a flesh and blood creature with no special abilities. That's the same thing. I don't know what they are. Maybe they're aliens. Maybe they're demonic entities. I'd have to lean more towards them being demonic entities than aliens. But at the same time, what's really frustrating is if they are demonic entities, then there are aspects to the phenomenon that just don't make sense if they are demonic entities. For example, why would a demonic entity have offspring? Why would they be seen drinking nasty water, stagnant water out of a moss-covered pond? Why would they be seen eating fetid roadkill on the side of a road in the middle of the night, or doing so many other things, being shot and bleeding? So what are they? I can't tell you, but I will tell you this. There's also this idea out there that they're all made in a laboratory, a government lab.
Yep.
Well, if that was a case, then how do you explain away the documented sighting that happened back in 1887? That was the first documented sighting. It happened in Wexford County, Michigan. We didn't have anything approaching the technology to make a test tube dogman back then. And there have been a lot of encounters that weren't that long after that happened. You can't explain those away that way. So what were those dogmen? I wouldn't be surprised if we have test tube dogmen on one hand and other dogmen that are more naturally occurring. Where those quote unquote naturally occurring dogmen come from, I don't know. But if they are demonic entities on one side, then on the other side, you do have test tube dogmen, then that would explain why some of these eyewitnesses report shooting them and seeing blood. So I don't know.
So I think one of the coolest and kind of scariest Dogman encounters that I've heard was on my buddy Josh's podcast, Mysteries Unknown. He interviewed an individual when he was like 12 years old. He was out hunting. He had like a single shot shotgun, I want to say it was. And when he was out walking, he described seeing like a fox, like a large fox. And he brought his shotgun up, and in his mind, he heard "don't," and then he pulled the trigger and shot this fox. And at the same time, he heard "shoot me." And he's like, I couldn't understand what I was saying. And then this thing just kind of looked at me, kind of like scampered off or whatever. And in the gist of it, he had like a communication with this thing. Say, why did it said, why did you shoot me? I told you don't shoot me. And he goes, you scared me. Because that's what I was trying to do. I was having fun. I was trying to scare you. That's what I like to do. And this thing had followed this gentleman throughout his life. This guy, he was like an older gentleman. He's like in maybe in his 50s, maybe 60s now. And he said this thing has followed him. And it got to the point where this thing could communicate with him. And he told him in no uncertain terms, when I am given the okay, this is the dog man talking to this guy. When I'm given the okay, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you first. What do you do with that?
Yeah, that's pretty creepy.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and plug the where they can find Dogman Encounters and some of your other stuff.
Well, it's really easy to listen to all of the podcasts I produce. You can just go to your favorite podcast app and listen. That's the best way to listen to all of them. So you've got Dogman Encounters Radio. You could type in Dogman Encounters, or if you have an Alexa in your home, you can just say, Alexa, play Dogman Encounters. And then the latest episode will just start playing for you. But yeah, Dogman Encounters is available on your favorite podcast app. Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio is available on your favorite podcast app. And my Bigfoot sighting is as well. And then I've got that paranormal show called My Paranormal Experience. It's on hiatus right now. I haven't released any new episodes in quite some time. But if you like paranormal phenomenon and strange cryptids like Catman encounters and rakes and things like that, then we've got that on My Paranormal Experience. So yeah, if you go to your favorite podcast app and do a search for all those podcasts, you can listen that way.
Awesome. So, Vic, do you have anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, what I'd like to put out there is if anyone listening has had a Dogman encounter that they're having a lot of trouble coming to terms with, it's a lot different now than what it used to be like. I mean, there are people out there you can contact and get help from. Be very careful who you reach out to, because there are a lot of people out there who are going to give you bad info. But yeah, I mean, if you've had trouble with an encounter that you've had, then reach out to Dan here. he cares about you and trying to help you out with your experience and helping you come to terms with your encounter, you're not alone. That's one of the biggest reasons why eyewitnesses have so much trouble coming to terms with their experiences, that sense of being all alone. Who can I talk with about this? And woe is me, I'm the only person to have such an experience. That's far from the case. People you know have probably had encounters with these things, but you just don't know it because they haven't put it out there for you.
Well, Vic, I want to say thank you again for coming on the show. And if you could, when we end the recording, if you could stay in the studio, in the green room, so to speak, I'd like to talk to you for a couple seconds after the episode. Okay.
Sure, I'll be there.
All right. Stand by 1 second. So everybody, that's our show for tonight. Vic, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. And again, if anybody's had any type of cryptid encounter, Sasquatch, Dogman, Kushtaka, Jersey Devil, Mothman, whatever, something you just can't wrap your head around and you just can't put it in a box, please, if you'd like to come on the show, email me at the cryptidpodcast72@gmail.com. That's the cryptidpodcast72@gmail.com. You guys, I made 1,000 subscribers today. I hit my 1,000 mark. I'm so happy. I'm so overjoyed. Thank you, every single person that takes their time out of their busy day to watch, whether it's 1 minute or 51 minutes of a show, gives me a like, a share, a comments on it. Thank you so much. I try to get back to everybody in the comments. Again, thank you so much. I can't do this without you guys. I appreciate all your support. And with that being said, as my buddy Josh says, everybody stay prayed up. And as I always like to say, remember, a legend always starts with a sighting. Have a good night, everybody.
I got a strange going on out here. Something just killed my dog.
Something killed your dog?